Dr. Marshangizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about a different way to think about political space. I've talked about the typical Nolan diagram before, and in particular in the context of how COVID seems to have shifted it from left-right to authoritarianism, freedom. Today I'm going to focus on this diagram instead, something that I concocted, which I think is a useful and different dimensioned way to think about it. And I'm going to walk through it in this brief science moment. One broad-scale way to think about the space of political positions, one that's different than the usual Nolan personal versus economic freedom space, the one I talked about before, is to consider whether the policies are A, well-intentioned, and B, whether they're civil liberties respecting. So there's two dimensions, well-intentioned and civil liberties respecting. The first, well-intentioned, concerns utilitarianism, but more generally concerns whether the policies are created with the intent of creating a better world in some sense. The second, civil liberties respecting, concerns libertarianism rather than utilitarianism, getting at whether the policies respect the rights of individuals rather than treating the populace as a single organism with parts that can, in principle, be sacrificed for the greater good. Let's look at this space in terms of the sorts of names we might give someone in each of the four spots in the 2x2 table. Let's start with criminal. Let's begin with a typical everyday criminal like a thief, a murderer, or a rapist. They're not well-intentioned and so end up in the second row. And also, they don't respect civil liberties, and so they fall in the right column. They're obviously a net bad to society. All right. Let's move now to the average bloke. The average bloke doesn't spend his or her life trying to promote the good, and so can't be categorized as well-intentioned per se, but generally doesn't violate other people's civil liberties. That puts them in the bottom left of this diagram. But their respect for civil liberties alone makes them a net good to society by their simply fairly participating in the free market of ideas in exchange. Now let's move to the upper left, to the saint. These are the folks with good intentions and who respect civil liberties. They have all the net good that the average mind-your-own-business blokes do, but they go out of their way to make a better world subject to not violating civil liberties. It's a tough business, but these saints can sometimes be responsible for great good. Authoritarian. Finally, we move to the upper right corner. Those who truly wish to make the world better and are willing to violate civil liberties to do so. Such folks are responsible for the greatest evils that have ever occurred, the great crimes against humanity, the genocides and democides. The fact that they were well-intentioned is not at all a defense, and it only lubricated their ability to carry out and justify abhorrent evil. Notice how, if you had to choose between well-intentioned or civil liberties respecting, like you have to choose one or the other, and you couldn't choose both, the clear choice is to respect civil liberties. At worst, you'll be an average bloke doing some minor good in the world. But if you're well-intentioned, at worst, you're promoting tyranny and likely to get tangled up in societal level evil. Some takeaways here. 1, being well-intentioned is not what's important. It can potentially be of help, but only when one respects civil liberties. 2, what dominates whether one does good is whether one respects civil liberties. 3, all things equal, respecting civil liberties leads to better policies. 4, it is not the case that all things equal, being well-intentioned leads to better policies. When civil liberties are not respected, righteous, well-intentioned people are as dangerous as humans get. And that was your Science Moment.